I'm Peter Lee, and this is Newsbud's China Watch. This week, black water rises in China, and win-win whine-whine for Obama Pivoteers. Last week, I talked about Rex Tillerson's remarkable use of the favorite Chinese term, win-win. Obama Asia hands fear and loathe win-win, since it's a signal that Trump will deal with China instead of devoting 100% of America's energies to containing China. Eli Ratner, Pivoteer-in-Chief, confirmed on his Twitter account that Tillerson's use of the phrase was no accident. I'm told Tillerson was fully briefed, understood context, decided to use phrases anyway. It seems Team Obama was completely blindsided by Tillerson's move, a sign that there maybe is a reasonably well-organized, functional, and non-leaking China team in the Trump administration somewhere. How about that? And here's something else the Obamanistas didn't see coming, a remarkable endorsement of win-win from the UN Security Council in a resolution concerning Afghanistan. It lauded, quote, the spirit of win-win cooperation as an effective means to promote security, stability, and economic and social development in Afghanistan, end quote. The PRC absolutely adored this resolution and gave it big play in state media. The resolution not only recognized win-win, it praised China's One Belt, One Road project. Bear in mind, this resolution was passed unanimously with the United States and all the other permanent and non-permanent members of the Security Council voting in favor. Matt Lee of Inner City Press, who probably knows more about the goings-on, inside dealings, and scandals at UN headquarters than any other journalist, told Newsbud that the resolution was drafted by, of all countries, Japan, and Japan was, quote, proud of its work, end quote. One has to wonder what India is thinking about this. It hates the idea of China entrenching itself in Afghanistan, and it hates the One Belt, One Road with the intensity of 1,000 suns. Since the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, leg of the OBOR, is a major projection of Chinese influence into South Asia, and it passes through a part of disputed Kashmir, a major defiance of Indian prerogatives. This remarkable turn of events leads me to speculate that the UN resolution may have been a quid pro quo for China in the negotiations to set up the famous Trump-Xi phone call. The U.S. wants to get out of Afghanistan. The PRC wants to get into Afghanistan on its own terms, and maybe this was how the deal went down. Things are not going too well for Team America in Afghanistan. The Afghan Taliban drove government forces out of a key district in Helmand province. A U.S. general complained that Russia was assisting the Taliban. I tend not to dismiss that accusation out of hand because I think both Russia and China are keen to help the Afghan Taliban gain the advantage and secure Afghanistan as a not quite failing state that doesn't harbor ISIS, Uyghurs, and other Islamic militants with regional ambitions. At the same time, the U.S. command announced it was going to defeat ISIS in Afghanistan this year. Interesting development for several reasons. First of all, the U.S.-Indian position used to be that the ISIS threat in Afghanistan was just an excuse by Pakistan, Russia, and China to coddle the Afghan Taliban. But on May 8th, ISIS fighters attacked an Afghan military hospital in the middle of Kabul, massacred over 30 people, and held out for hours until Afghan security forces were able to secure the hospital. This brazen attack pretty much shut down the ISIS in Afghanistan is nothing to worry about story. So, now the United States is declaring it's going to wipe out ISIS in Afghanistan by the end of the year, not just to stabilize Afghanistan, but also remove the ISIS factor from the political equation so the U.S. can laser focus on the Afghan Taliban problem. Good luck with that. Seriously. The biggest below-the-radar story in global security is the ongoing exodus of Islamic militants from Syria and Iraq, and apparently the U.S. decision that this time it's going to do something about it, and that means it has to do something about it in Afghanistan. Over the last 30 years, The easiest way to deal with Islamic fighters was to shuffle them off to another conflict. In my opinion, Hillary Clinton's clever plan to stabilize Libya post-Gaddafi by shipping fighters off to Syria was an even bigger crime/blunder than George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq. That's saying a lot. In any case, it looks like the U.S. military wants to shut the door on ISIS fighters, and it has to do it quick, especially in failing state havens like Afghanistan. There are already reports that Tajik fighters, who were originally slated to go to the Middle East, are staying home and looking to join up with forces in Central Asia like ISIS Khorasan province in Afghanistan. So, it increasingly looks like the United States is interested in win-win, and China in Afghanistan. Central Asian security issues also figure in one of the more remarkable stories to come out of China this year, the announcement that Frontier Services Group would establish forward operating bases in China's west in Xinjiang and its south in Yunnan. Remarkable because Frontier Services Group is owned by the Black Prince of Black Ops, Blackwater's own Erik Prince. To increase the wow factor, Prince's sister, Betsy DeVos, is now Trump's Secretary of Education. The fact that China is willing to provide a happy home for Erik Prince is pretty interesting. He may be the brother of a Trump administration cabinet officer, but he's also a documented loose cannon nutcase. Erik Prince's China interests are no secret. After he departed Blackwater, he set up shop in Abu Dhabi and Hong Kong with a new enterprise, Frontier Services Group, or FSG. A major investor in FSG is China's CITIC Group, itself one of the more gonzo risk-taking outfits that emerged from the early go-go days of China's economic reforms. FSG was marketed as not a merc goon squad. In other words, not in the business of providing roided-up, Oakley-wearing, assault rifle-toting, ex-special forces types whose idea of providing security was shooting up masses of civilians. You know, like Blackwater did in 2007 in Iraq, when it killed 17 people during a rampage in Nisour Square? FSG is avowedly in the business of providing unarmed logistics in complicated places where normal companies are less willing to operate. FSG's historical focus was Africa. There's a lot of places in Africa that have resources their governments and international corporations want to develop but can't quite control, and they attract the competing attention of insurgents, rebels, and banditti. The government of South Sudan may be a basket case, but it was able to scrape together $23 million to pay FSG to try to help keep its oil industry running in the middle of a civil war. However, that apparently wasn't enough money or excitement for Erik Prince. According to George Clooney's NGO, The Sentry, FSG also discreetly provided $5.6 million in logistical support to the South Sudan military, which is a no-no. And, according to The Intercept magazine, Erik Prince pitched the government of South Sudan on a covert $300 million action plan called Iron Fist, not to be confused with the action movie Iron Fist, which would unleash a battalion of heavily armed mercs to rampage through South Sudan in some way that the U.S. government would supposedly never find out about. Well, somebody found out, and The Intercept got the story. Prince was not only keen to provide muscle on the ground, he personally put a lot of money and energy into prototyping a light attack plane that could make FSG a provider of air power to interested parties. So-called light attack planes are crop dusters, inexpensive, maneuverable turboprops. The U.S. government adopted crop dusters for coca eradication programs in South America. And since narcos didn't like the planes and shot at them, they had to be ruggedized with armor, bulletproof glass, and self-sealing fuel tanks. The planes fly low and slow like drones, but they have what's called superior situational awareness, which means the pilot can turn his head and look out the window instead of staring at a video monitor. The inevitable next step was arming the planes with Gatling guns and Hellfire missiles and bombs. One attack version is sold as the AT-820U. The United Arab Emirates bought a dozen of them, not from FSG, and used them in the ongoing Yemen bloodbath, and also put some in Libya at the service of General Haftar. And believe it or not, apparently Erik Prince's guys were flying them. In Kenya, FSG wanted to become an operator of unscheduled flights out of an airfield near Mombasa, providing specialized aviation services like aerial surveys of oil pipelines. However, the Kenyan government refused to license it in 2014, officially because of questions about FSG's ownership structure. Unofficially, I think it was because the Kenyan government and probably AFRICOM and the US government didn't want Erik Prince operating a Chinese-backed private air service or Erik Prince maybe flying attack aircraft around Africa that, in addition to doing all the terrible things that Erik Prince operations usually do, would be complicating America's strategies and operations in Africa and maybe even reducing the leverage that the U.S. enjoys over shaky local governments as a vital supplier of military muscle. According to The Intercept, the whole thing blew up at a board of directors meeting in Hong Kong in March 2015. The respectable American contingent in FSG management and on the board, which had probably been blabbing about whatever they knew or suspected to the Pentagon, Langley, The Intercept, and whoever else would listen, bailed. When retired Admiral William Fallon resigned from the board, he said, "This wasn't what I had signed up for." Well, maybe what the U.S. executives had thought they had signed up for was making big money from on-the-books business and maybe also making big money from off-the-books business, Air America style. Air America, for those of you too young to remember, was a CIA-affiliated airline that ran spooks, fighters, arms, drugs, and who knows what else in and out of South Asian conflict zones for Uncle Sam during the Vietnam War. Instead, maybe what the U.S. side got into was Air Prince, maybe even the Prince Air Force, also maybe potentially Air PRC, an asset for China to project power and perhaps conduct security and covert operations beyond its borders. That service might have been pretty attractive in parts of Africa, especially for leaders who might prefer to have Chinese muscle on tap instead of relying on AFRICOM, French troops, or roaming South African mercenaries. Anyway, after the board ruckus, the Americans left, Prince stayed, and the Chinese contingent took over. And in December of 2016, FSG announced a pivot. In a press release, it stated that FSG, quote, is adjusting its corporate strategy to better capitalize on the opportunities available from China's One Belt, One Road development initiative. The updated strategic focus will enable FSG to offer its customers improved access to the challenging markets surrounding China's borders. FSG will be opening a forward operating base in China's Yunnan province. This will allow FSG to be able to better serve companies in Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia. Subsequently, FSG will be opening a forward operating base in Xinjiang Autonomous Region to serve businesses in the surrounding countries. End quote. This isn't just Erik Prince popping crazy pills. The semi-official Global Times interviewed him about it, and the Chinese government let Global Times print it. And not only that, the Chinese government let the completely official People's Daily pick up the Global Times story. Basically, it looks like the U.S. is doing its best to shut FSG out of Africa, and Prince is searching for a new niche in China. His competitive advantage is supposed to be his eagerness to operate on wild and woolly frontiers, hence the name Frontier Services Group, where other companies hesitate to go. In China, that means in Yunnan, down by the Golden Triangle, where the borders of Burma, Thailand, and Laos meet, and in Xinjiang, in the middle of Stanland. I tend to doubt the PRC is specifically tasking FSG with any security-related missions just yet, but maybe there's interest, especially in light of Prince's aviation-related obsessions and, I would think, the fact that he has highly skilled and experienced mercenary ground and air personnel on tap and available when needed. Air-based surveillance and rapid response is an increasingly important priority for China, which has long, skinny infrastructure projects stretching thousands of miles through Asia that pass through places where security is weak and the locals, and maybe the regional powers and superpowers, are hostile, and they place huge burdens on surveillance and security tasking. There are projects like the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a planned road-rail pipeline link, which runs 3,000 kilometers from Pakistan to Kashgar in Xinjiang, and the 770-kilometer Sittwe-Kunming oil and gas pipelines, which run from Burma to Yunnan in China, and the pipeline and railway projects that run east-west through Xinjiang and the Central Asian stands and are increasingly vulnerable to ISIS-related disruption. The CPEC is already the focus of local opposition/terrorism and a significant multinational security operation. China announced it is quintupling its marine force to 100,000 people. A good number of these Marines will probably end up securing the Gwadar port in Pakistan at the southern terminus of the CPEC, which is leased to China. Security along the CPEC in the rest of Pakistan is in the hands of the Pakistan Army, which is perhaps the only security force more violent and uncontrolled than Blackwater allegedly was. Pakistan's province of Balochistan is reportedly turning into a horror show of raids and disappearances as the Pakistan Army and security services flood the province to trample local opposition and suppress attacks on CPEC infrastructure. India and perhaps the United States are probably thinking about assisting the development of a local resistance that might spill over into Xinjiang. China doesn't want to see Balochistan-type problems of attacks on facilities, staff, and security of the CPEC as it winds through Xinjiang. Xi Jinping has vowed to build a Great Wall of Iron to secure Xinjiang. Maybe FSG, with its expertise, its personnel, and its planes, could be part of that. In a statement to BuzzFeed, FSG reiterated it was not getting into the merc business and would be doing unarmed security projects. BuzzFeed's anonymous informants mocked this idea. "It is ridiculous," said one. "Are they using sonic weapons?" joked the other. "Is it psychic powers?" Well, remember that Chairman Mao thing about power comes out of the barrel of a gun? I think the CCP still remembers. China has a thing about not letting non-state actors, especially private companies run by U.S. spooks, break its monopoly on lethal force. Employees of foreign-controlled companies like FSG can't carry weapons. Meanwhile, there are plenty of locally owned security companies stocked with ex-PLA soldiers that do get to carry guns. And there is, of course, the PLA itself. So, an FSG Merc Army and Air Force handling routine security operations has a ways to go. But an exception might be made for special situations. One problem that accompanies operation of resource and infrastructure projects in conflict zones is hostage situations. Traditionally, when Chinese citizens are taken hostage overseas, the PRC relied on security services of the local government to do their best, or worse, to resolve the situation. That might turn out to be increasingly unacceptable to Xi Jinping. If the PRC wants to respond rapidly and effectively to hostage crises in neighboring countries or at home, it would be very helpful to have an existing organization of planes, pilots, and personnel that know the local conditions and is used to moving in and out and around these places when days and even hours count. You know, like FSG from those ominously named forward operating bases in Xinjiang and Yunnan? So, maybe the PRC is willing to welcome Erik Prince because it likes the idea of a pop-up counterterrorism capability that could be called on to handle an emergency that Chinese special forces might not be ready to handle. If there's some high-profile hostage crisis that calls on Blackwater-style experts, I would expect they would go along in a nominally advisory role to Chinese forces, the way JSOC goes along in a nominally advisory role to U.S. allies, up close and personal, armed, and ready to kill people. But even if the opportunities for killing people in Yunnan and Xinjiang and the surrounding countries don't materialize, there is one area in which FSG's mercenaries could find immediate employment, and that's in training, conducting non-weapons related training for ex-PLA soldiers and more downmarket, running bodyguard schools in China. Bodyguard schools are a big business in China. There are around 3,000 of them, training people to provide protection to Chinese VIPs in-country and overseas. U.S. and Israeli instructors are valued the most highly because, quite bluntly, the PRC is still way behind the United States and Israel in the art of teaching people how to kill well-trained, well-armed, and highly motivated adversaries. That's all for this week. Thanks for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, go to newsbud.com, where you'll find exclusive content available only to the Newsbud community. I'm Peter Lee for Newsbud's China Watch.
For just a small subscription fee, you can become a member of the Newsbud community and help keep this website running. Your subscription will provide you with full community access to exclusive content, including videos and articles from Newsbud's team of experts and analysts, as well as a members-only monthly newsletter from Newsbud's founder, Sibel Edmonds. Sign up today for full access at newsbud.com.